أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We send blessings and greetings upon the messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, his entire household, his companions and his progeny. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's barakah continue to be upon each and every one of them. It is out of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy that we all are gathered here today. Had He wanted, He would have been amongst those who always disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yet He has accepted us to be from among those that will obey Him. We should be thanking Him for that. We are worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not by choice. It is not because we want to worship. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands all of us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, Ya ayyuhan nas u'budu rabbakum alladhi khalaqakum walladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. O mankind, worship your Rabb, the one who created you and those that came before you, in order that you will develop the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in order that you will develop the consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reason for which we come here every day to worship, it is because we are being accepted to be the slaves that fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us be consistent in this worship.
Sang sehingga adunia ye sebato omarki oke webe baswege siasi kubato koko kama yema amasu because mina ine pae tono popo enemi so tono itiki kona ikone kubato omarki we omarki opo basu koso su kubato ke ato koso pae sebae excuse me agotra ni kubato Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mo okano koto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kana sipai situ kubato kono ala obe pasoe san subato ko den afum ahepo tasmo mamoto ko sasu iti sibato ko kwenya siasi kubato ko go because me mamatu Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sitem no mosone kama ile mafutai kono pensu en saso kesube ke sa atala kono kono kuma shababa pasoe so situ kubato ko bobo ya
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala haven't commanded us to pray, yet there are individuals amongst us, amongst humankind, who are not obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about them in the Quran. He said that these people have ears, but they do not hear. They have eyes, but they cannot see. He said, Ulaika kal an'am bal hum adall. He said, these are like animals. He said, in fact, they are worse than animals. The creator of the world, the one who created you and me, is declaring a set of individuals in the Ummah that they are worse than animals. This is to tell us that we are lucky to be amongst those that He has chosen to always come here and worship Him. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us continue in this effort.
because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala obo choose to buy obo gives to kan afma ni obe buy nufisa afum alane seba afum mo oshak mo kan sokan mo Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or describe afma nge ka amu tom obe buy afma ni ayika adunya ni dosa siye si katonga la naso ayika katonga su amba effort na kere anike amba endesiela kere antulie ayene bongan tuna ayemai Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ko kana subai nan ayene o tashamia en o kana subai akane amtashi mo tasham akbabi kasan katoka su Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ko bai pipi kono oboton kori afumanye kono body style afumanye awas amtashi tashamle wene san zi ka amagama Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala we must zi bangwane always sit di sabum atmakli ka eba mashallah ka pro beli ko tiba baksan basu dagine
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised to gather all of us on a day that we all are aware about, the day of Qiyamah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has talked about this particular day in the Quran in so many verses. This is why today I have chosen to talk on the topic of how severe that day is going to be. How severe the day of Qiyamah shall be upon mankind, especially those who do not worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Allah Zawajal open suka andunyane supaya insan afum anye buat koye en kafum anye kono opokat supaya san sisi kisafum anyesa kore musiesa because kono kuma shaba basoi opo business koye opo plasu ademin ane atilani ayuman kiyama sabe muskotu la yakaka endosi Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala oka mokotoka na subai opoti ka esopti be ona discourse opoti opa solwati opegurwati wa arege na muslima monye tabaki whether or the experience or good scriptures will understand.
The day of Qiyamah that we are discussing today is a very great day. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Ya ayyuhan nasu اتقوا ربكم إن زلزلة الساعة شيء عظيم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that all mankind fear your Rabb, for indeed the day of the shaking of the ground is a thing that is very great. It is a day that we must be always thinking about and turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in complete worship. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us this.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wajelasu okana supai watutokla suka adene kwa experience yo malkiana okana su ofofana suka ambasanya okano ko polidege wajelasu besa makwe supai kumsigesa kono kuma shaba because wakuna shaba we kono bani na kutokla suka adene moloma ninge and adene okol golwachi obaki o yene mosa tustra papai meyo tense a ye price again about obak sunwati and obak burwale obaki of the one and korea to kono balasuna watala kono experience moto authority sukakulale ziti tigesa ale yene malama modini.
He took an oath by this day, and whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes an oath upon, that is a great thing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, La uqsimu biyawmil qiyamah. I have taken an oath by the day of Qiyamah, the day that is very much severe, and man must understand. In order of us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us of how we should focus and think about this day. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاسْتَمِعْ يَوْمَ يُنَادِي الْمُنَادِ مِن مَّقَامٍ قَرِيبٍ يَوْمَ يَسْمَعُونَ الصَّيْحَةَ بِالْحَقِّ. We should be paying attention to the day that we shall hear that sound, that awful cry that will happen happen once, making twice, this particular dunya is smashed and all of us are resurrected. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us understand this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has talked directly to those who disbelieve in this day. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, هَلْ يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَّا أَنْ تَأْتِيَهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ أَوْ يَأْتِيَ رَبُّكَ أَوْ يَأْتِيَ بَعْضُ آيَاتُ رَبِّكَ يَوْمَ يَأْتِي بَعْضُ آيَاتِ رَبِّكَ لَا يَنفَعُ نَفْسًا إِيمَانُهَا لَمْ تَكُنْ آمَنَتْ مِنْ قَبْلُ أَوْ كَسَبَتْ مِنْ إِيمَانِهَا خَيْرًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, are they waiting for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring the malaikas to them, to tell them about Allah and to tell them about the Qiyamah? Or are they waiting for Allah himself to come so that they can see Allah? Or are they waiting for the last signs of Qiyamah? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the last signs of Qiyamah will come. No soul will believe when they had not believed. And no soul will gain any benefit if they had not gained that benefit from their belief before that day comes. That is why we must prepare before that day comes. The day that the sun will rise from the opposite direction, we must be conscious of that.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala okuko panesu afam agete lane koeka akera akoson Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam okane afmane kubaye moka moko topo kana suka amba senyori dani afmane kwenya ngan atilana antira akar amaleka anton anekane akubaye lanenu okuma shebawe o ankar kamantin ngan anekane okuma shebawe baye lanemi nuka aseso kona belege o afmane antira kan akar kamanen madda mashari madda some bakder en are kasi amba tepele Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala o itafmane amankare wallahi are mamandere koko dia are ba munafa owni ka ache is otelane en oye polane koko di baso ki so de munafa ko kadar ka oche islane ka kuru sai ka malane menge kuro bole o munafa sone kana ko munafa so kankia.
We should be aware first that before the actual final day of the dunya will come, there is a day that will be your final day in the dunya. You and I have, remember a final day that we have in this dunya. All of us shall taste that day that we will tell our farewells in the dunya. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Kullu nafsin dha'iqatul maut. Every soul shall taste death. Thumma ilayna turja'un. And to us, you all shall return. That is why before we dive into explaining how the final day of the dunya will be, I want to remind all of us that indeed there is a day that shall be our final day in the dunya. We must think about that day. Perhaps it will be a reminder for us to remember that day that the entire dunya itself will end. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us think about this.
Kanguru believe tamtane adege baloba sonini. Adege ai ni achelani. Dafet san susole se o ankiam anfet ni. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yo islamiga ankuran. Mo okar mo kontomo lo masoe. Pipi muno ai tamtane adege. Ka tayo tambem yo kandunya ni. En adege ambapide mu bayak tamtane si kole ya. Ane muno muntai agar adege. Mo kone ka ambi ngam nakabo mai. Ane itu tamtane ni. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala okane su kubaye. Bibi san su boy sa fam ngam lane. Kono otutori su en sitine matama shayi. Sitengane ache onna bi okane su ache kono kuma sha okane su. Wallahi sitiko ni na beka ankiam arene maloma sogi. Sebaki sa fam abakamira. Dan kuru san kama tuma messe mi mani. Kuro kuma bili ko su malane ni obak sebati ka tasu. Hanna su go kuma sha bayi oflan.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us of how the life of every individual shall be taken. At that time, that will be your last. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, for the believer, he says, وَالنَّاشِطَاتِ نَشْطًا, by the soul that shall be removed with ease and respect. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in another verse, فَكَيْفَ إِذَا تَوَفَّتْهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ يَضْرِبُونَ وُجُوهَهُمْ وَأَدْبَارَهُمْ. Of the disbelievers, Allah said, when death comes to them, the angels shall hit their faces and their backs while withdrawing the soul from them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us against disbelief. May we be people that will always believe until death meets us.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opotoisu matabasheri Toma bashi angesuna awuni kwetika andunya yeye kawuni kweto we kulo opadis den kono komo yika mai amamu me kulo ayama koyi kuma shaba mo okar mo ko zolo mo suka basi otu bashi otu loi angesuna mo mo so lo maleka otu angesuna otano tan den ye respect them kokal kane suda ambasalo mo kar mo ko zolo mo sukai ka anyesi lane kono Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ni mama sobra amaleka mo kale no anyesi manini anti napko ka ade domo anti slap ane ko ka de den ka ka buto ka bura ko ismail ba anyesi manini mono mo miskin ni ka andunya ni wallahi ambari na ko testify against muno ka ayo wal kiyama ka kuru san si safma akulane kan dinani anna pro di fashion iskinasa.
That is the final day of mankind in the dunya. How about the final day of the entire dunya itself? The day that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring the dunya to an end. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us of the final day, the day of Qiyamah. Allahu la ilaha illahu la yajma'annakum ila yawmil qiyamah la rayba fihi. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, for indeed there is no Lord except Him, and He will definitely gather every man on the day of Qiyamah, and there is no doubt about that. That is a day that has no doubt. Allah has guaranteed us in the Quran that that day shall come. We must be people who send forth good deeds in order to be saved from the severity of that day.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opotorisu kan ambase yoka moko pori da su kubaye kono ba anfoso pet siki afna pet ngabednan ospoto klana ka eyete baye kono ko baye ospoto klana de rokin en kurma sheba klon kiaso en kinno ni manjere kamno atimna yo ngi batim kapsane no batim fofane fofane batim fofane fomu no shirka moy Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala au konson kare na bay ku kin chilade en boko dia ashika yati kono ko tukere asu de kin auto blasu en osi to target for.
How severe is this day? In order to acknowledge the severity of this day, in order for us to understand completely how severe this day would be, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, He described this day to us. He tells us in the Quran of what will happen to the earth. إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالَهَا وَأَخْرَجَتِ الْأَرْضُ أَثْقَالَهَا. When the earth shall be shaken to the highest peak, and it will remove all what have been buried inside of it. And Allah tells us that وَقَالَ الْإِنسَانُ مَا لَهَا. Man will ask, what is happening to this ground today? Why is the ground removing all of these things? You have buried ill things for your friend, your colleague in the workplace. You are an enemy to the friend. You go to the fortune tellers and you bury things on the ground. Know that you are beginning to keep your own burden on the day of Qiyamah. That will be one of your burdens on the day of Qiyamah that you will carry. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala free us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, وَإِذَا الْأَرْضُ مُدَّتْ وَأَلْقَتْ مَا فِيهَا وَتَخَلَّتْ. When the earth will be stretched and it will give out all that have been buried inside of it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَتَرَى الْأَرْضَ بَارِزًا وَحَشَرْنَاهُمْ فَلَمْ نُغَادِرْ مِنْهُمْ أَحَدًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that you will see the earth plain, everything will be smashed to dust, and you will stand at one point and see as far as your eyes can stretch. This is to tell us that every mountain, every house shall perish on that particular day. That is to tell us that we must be fearful of that day. No matter what we do, let our minds be running to a day that we shall be gathered in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and nobody will be there to help us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us His forgiveness. Amen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us of what will happen to the mountains themselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَتَرَى الْجِبَالَ تَحْسَبُهَا جَامِدًا وَهِيَ تَمُرُّ مَرَّ السَّحَابِ. You see the mountains today and think of them to be very solid. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, on the day of the blowing of the trumpet, you would see the mountains moving in the air like dust or clouds in the air. This is to tell us how severe this day will be. We must be people that prepare before that day comes, the day that it is only our deeds that will save us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala understand this. What will happen to the skies? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains to us of what will happen to this sama that we see. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِذَا السَّمَاءُ انفَطَرَتْ وَإِذَا الْكَوَاكِبُ انتَثَرَتْ. When the skies shall be split and torn apart, and the stars will fall and scatter to pieces. This is how severe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us of this day. We must be people who think of these things and know that one day it will happen, just as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said.
When Okumasheba Opo Gamata Masheri Ameba Kene Norotai, Okanas Dokono Sutarakpa Roye, or Anne, Okut Watch Obaksubare, Bipot Tere, Sutanan Ansamaye. Sam sneaker you to know effort as lucky you can stop with the lay. Kuro all tia marini and Spicer. Coco bear a day in the bed, sitting at us, room to door, again and Coco bear the postcard. None of them of a game skilling was to let it when you don't alas when I was and personal or put in a name Coco moment or you market in a day. The chiller is talking up market, a job I could think not as a economy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us of the sun and the moon, what will happen to them on that day. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, إِذَا الشَّمْسُ كُوِّرَتْ. When the sun shall be rewind and its light shall be extinguished. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the sun that we see today very bright, when the trumpet is blown, the sun will be unwrapped and this particular sun will lose its light. And the moon, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَجُمِعَ الشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرُ. He will bring the sun and the moon together. These two will eclipse and it will lead to a total darkness of the earth. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's throne that will light the earth. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us understand how severe the last day is. Sanu minemo imno situ tamtamneta ale obaksawashi. Mo okar mo ko tomo tlomaswe. O tope ale tidiamo fan sama misnanga de soso light dari amo moyan ale soso light da faitani amo fan soso light. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opipi ale kandeke otia mari ale sele tido poto plan de kin opo predi ago planepi baken koko be min ko sum. Okari yamari amo fanye akade together the king yeleta be obo plane king ogo predi mosa mamsuneke Allah was by ayat kuwa odi antem kasi Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala oyo ko yamari ade to yamo kwa by kin koko das konom da be damo yi anen to mo na ba ku tasuka ko yego.
What will happen to the seas on that day? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us of what will happen. وَإِذَا الْبِحَارُ سُجِّرَتْ. When the seas shall be filled with blazing fire. What you see today in the seas, you think of the sea as water. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that that water that we see today shall be transformed to a blazing fire on the day of Qiyamah. It will be very much bad for individuals that witness that day. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us among those that will not witness the day that the world will end itself.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala watope kata bangwa muslim kama zone muslim ntara ko de banklo msima mono ne kili owa munilale se ke bobralenge se dola kala subhanahu wa ta'ala como beba yesu ka afuma yabi bobralenge ka kuro yesu kutira before
we are going to discuss the situation of people themselves on that day, the final day. What will happen to people on earth? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us an understanding.
Sanu pes kita tam nek pai kadar ka sibotel mayete ka ba anto to kwe mo ton sibotel ka ka be kamaran ka munoi yete de pedire sidakal kanem ku pai anto bitna sukono maskel mane oba silwa ale kariyere kya ane ganan kiyama Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so otori to yo ko ikore ko ba suwache well that mata
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us of what will happen. So people who will witness that day, we should know that before that day comes, Allah will send a very cold wind that will take the lives of all the believers. And all those who remain on earth shall be disbelievers. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that when they see that day, it will be very much consequential upon them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَوْمَ تَرَوْنَهَا تَذْهَلُ كُلُّ مُرْضِعَةٍ أَمَّا أَرْضَعَتْ وَتَضَعُ كُلُّ ذَاتِ حَمْلٍ حَمْلَهَا وَتَرَى النَّاسَ سُكَارَى وَمَا هُمْ بِسُكَارَى وَلَكِنَّ عَذَابَ اللَّهِ شَدِيدٌ. The day that you will see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the suckling mother who is suckling his child will throw away the child because of the fear of that day. And the one who is pregnant will automatically miscarry. And you will see man as a drunkard when they have not drunk anything. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, that is how severe that particular day is. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us understand.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala utwali suku pai pipi alege kayo matere kono oba afif anye kono mopipi ay atopul bem mosobra daga atopul nge amba ko le kera atane abe obodi tuna anye ba ko che kasto anye silale da pai no mogi kare anye o pipi kono kare anye ambo beke antinne all we need to pay. Kono mokuro moleki kale kala ansende yege. O kara uweba owan ko mosa mine mo master pai. Mokara motsa ko ide ko master koi. Ko liya ede mi mo robo ka master yege. Das o satisfy. Ore ide beke. O tshawa ko e kale lo da master mo fita ko. O zinen afma pay and whenever they came out, Nangolo Wulunen, or Colonen, or Puto Kalunen, After I said, none of Mama or Mokochabi, that's what I want to love and Chabi. When I'm from my hand now, or I but a young of people are they have pastor, and we know no back as if better.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us how people will react. In Surah Al-Abbas, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَإِذَا جَاءَتِ الصَّاخَّةُ يَوْمَ يَفِرُّ الْمَرْءُ مِنْ أَخِيهِ وَأُمِّهِ وَأَبِيهِ وَصَاحِبَتِهِ وَبَنِيهِ لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مِّنْهُمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ شَأْنٌ يُغْنِيهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when the trumpet is blown, you would see a man running away from their families. They run away from their mothers, their fathers. They run away from their sons and daughters. They run from their wives and those that they have been friends with. This is because that day will be very much severe. Allah says, everybody's burden shall be upon them. Everybody will think of himself, how will I be freed from this particular severity? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us understand.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, kana suka sura dia tanoko opunto lisole kubai. Baby arrêté and the citizen only takes when Momo ya mile ni muno na ba family. Sino only takes okuja family no. Okas okuja okutera okuja afetino. Okara okuja osko. Okuja afetino. Akuja kate. Ambola nyako. Ambola na okasira. Ambola na yakna. Kwene mayoya. Arrêté. Ngaiki mataba shiri machi. Berware volunteering of them of ourselves to never be what children is from. Never be. Go for the children that
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us of how all lives will end on that day. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَنُفِخَ فِي الصُّورِ فَصَعِقَ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ إِلَّا مَنْ شَاءَ Allah. When they blow the trumpet, everything that has life in the heavens and on the earth shall automatically fall dead. Everything will die. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَنُفِخَ فِيهِ أُخْرَى فَإِذَا هُمْ قِيَامٌ يَنْظُرُونَ. They will blow the trumpet for the second time, and behold, everybody will rise from their graves. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us understand this.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anasukubai bibi aneke kambeke o yamani o maleka ko o yosron amposo na kambe kete mani o fen kete ma kambe kato to koi ko be di ban yesu kande eya nolota we eya lokome bibi o maleka we o fen kete ma kege ko be di ban yesu be spoki and aneke antekini pro zama yamani ngesi kame kowe o antema ngam ambaye kupaine undauni ekono na ba tradition da ba to kritoni so pro mobile ko tigai.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us of how man will appear on that day. خُشَّعًا أَبْصَارُهُمْ يَخْرُجُونَ مِنَ الْأَجْدَاثِ كَأَنَّهُمْ جَرَادٌ مُنْتَشِرٌ مُهْطِعِينَ إِلَى الدَّاعِ يَقُولُ الْكَافِرُونَ هَذَا يَوْمٌ عَسِيرٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, their face will be filled with fear and humility, and they will be removed from their graves. You will see them moving in their groups like cockroaches. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that everybody will be moving towards a caller who is making a very loud call. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the disbelievers will say, this is a very severe day. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us be among the category that will be saved on that day.
Mare mambek lasbana wa taala toka na siku bae momo redi kachela afumo mama de fe kate makabe kamarun mo bashi ayes eyedis epo fiibe monate takako witness ale yenge ko tsori ko yenge ontne kuno be ko tsuri kakabo makomo mapoka ashitana beto tui to baso when no better both focus and oh no defense I'm with I'm too the Yama Connect Mama by man no better Kulot King Nama Connect Ole no better or to focus Alapa back to a footstep in no better or back over the witness because then opens to watching Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or bayan but you go back I go back from there until not where this kind of
Allah tells us how they will come in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَجَاءَتْ كُلُّ نَفْسٍ مَعَهَا سَائِقٌ وَشَهِيدٌ. Every soul will come with someone who will drive it and someone that will be a witness against it. The angels that were with you throughout your lives will now come to be a witness against you. All the things that you are hearing, yet you engage in all the evil deeds that you engaged in. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, a witness will come to give testimony against you on the day of Qiyamah.
After Kuromo already Takako Tonglaswe, Atila Antur, there are body Kachela Amak, Kakoneka Alege. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Bokanesu to buy. We know in bed, or Tibakone, or Ba Afum Nagan, Ganesuno, Okin Oyo Krimeliko, Okin Oyo Dara, Oyo Pushway, Kamakone Kakotonga Lege, Afma Legia, Okurma Shaba, or Laya Mari Amalega. Ayebi eret akomu from eret del kanto fanye prono sheba ko somu amaleka ko chapuno ingana tino timbe chemio tell water kilo nan atarachi and a chem of a chenis swallens ka all say a chem back machine man say ko ko be amaleka gat stilamu and some others en la back imuno o what limu o what not to go be ka ko ne ko kutina kata ko mashela.
What will happen to the hellfire on that? We need to understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us of how the hellfire itself will react to man on that day. إِذَا رَأَتْهُمْ مِنْ مَكَانٍ بَعِيدٍ سَمِعُوا لَهَا تَغَيُّظًا وَزَفِيرًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when the hell will see the mujrims, the criminals coming, they will hear a sound from the hellfire when it will be roaring. It will be making a bubbling sound, inviting them to the fire, telling them that indeed this will be your abode. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, تَكَادُ تَمَيَّزُ مِنَ الْغَيْظِ. Out of the anger of the hell, it will almost explode. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us. This is why we must fear the day that we shall return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wakane sukupai pipi bo uwang kakara kofata aleja anyechelane kwe akafrege kaderka alenge ante nama patlomo monye do toy pipi kawo katla tachela ta afumanya ngete islanda kulma shabai antumbe bashim tulo matepi mine muno ngani mo eyete ban eshemamba mo yema kayote tanlis eshima jema uro bijela na pai denuka aplesage because nonaya mapat man medis morke nonaya dani tikide kuma shaba kale supai ande yenge obak sirwachi and ogor berwachi kakusan sisa manem lana kuranda suko.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that the mujrims, the criminals, shall be put into the fire. All of them will be put, and they will ask the Jahannam, يَوْمَ نَقُولُ لِجَهَنَّمْ هَلِ امْتَلَأْتِ وَتَقُولُ هَلْ مِن مَّزِيدٍ. The day Allah said, we will ask the Jahannam, are you filled? Is it enough? And the Jahannam would say, no, if there is more, then bring more. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prepared the Jahannam. And the Jahannam always would want to burn those who disbelieve. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us be people that will die in belief.
Amba senyoka mogo otorisoni ayinga ankura ninge kuma shaba orasu dubai namsine tangane chinoti na chapo pana suka amukadira tangane okana su dubai o alenge manja na mage mapona criminals kasan anyepidis achekura mafafane se na antonti antagachi amaisha bishi anko ngata imakoi mama pokira na mapoi kana tade mawaka sofa kana tade kuma sheba romo if ayifanye pi akona dialect ka anyempa shekia ka anjana mangipai nan aidepo wonono le repoi beki anjana mama reply ka pai yala pipi rekadi ade bakse so dashi de sikani mo Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala au kono bopri pia place ni matela helpa ya ni pai uneuni oyiyo sai acheku mashabatia malikobe kono nikemo bako ye kampese yo kui kankuru sansi ya panem lane sichewi kankura ko bekso suka ba bekane.
Finally, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us of the condition of the believers. You and I, who make efforts to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us of what will be our own situation on the day of Qiyamah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Innal muttaqina fi jannatin wa na'im, fakihina bima atahum rabbuhum wa waqahum rabbuhum adhab al-jahim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, those who are the muttaqin, those who are conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shall be in the al-Jannah, in the heaven, in the paradise. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the paradise of joy and happiness, they will be amazed with the provisions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will save them from all of these things that we have discussed here today. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us be people that will be in that category.
Kadareka support mastan support swalens a chapel masuk bae ande what watch kono way and a blessing matela a hellfire a jana maninge kuro yoba ko bera ko mage pensha kono nenge moya support sara kuro God describe a blessing nge o kala su bae moya akum anye kono Opadis uwenesga data nane anila neko from this odbanaka adoro de mobashina kiai ang agobo ko yamalane mewi o afun ngati nan apada yes ada kuno Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala o obalo moko bekara o bekara nan ambaki ka al janna ne ka kursan si afun anye mulane kurano bekasuda janna al janna malomo moni kuma sheba afun ngati meme popo ngadi Woko be ipo kishisina ka sofa ache anye ka donut man sofa nan nonen a place anye people to nan wellness nga a demina me provide that na dama sofa koto ambaso kutilne koko a fe bato futet ngamba nga ka kurusan ipo ba antan and yesterday no box monet to no ka de visiting anto bika ngenge ka kusuba adem support ka ta kunta musikere kan kursi sa kumanya belande sece ya kumanya ino ani toda suar bolen tsanane kan kursi ya kumanya belande tsanane sika suar tsanane